Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 266 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is controlling the mind. Our quote of the day comes to us from Napoleon Hill. You either control your mind or it controls you. I've been a fan of our guest today for quite some time. I've really enjoyed reading his books, and I absolutely loved his newest book, Staring Down the Wolf. It is an honor to have Mark Devine join us. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Mark, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Happy to be here. Super stoked, as a matter of fact.
I appreciate it. So the first question we ask is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
I already have. So yes, starting with myself.
You definitely have. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you have either a no-quit story of your own or perhaps a really challenging time that tested you that you'd like to share with our listeners today.
Just like everyone who's listening to this, or every human, of course, right? That is the human experience, right? We set out into our life, and then all of a sudden we're beset by a challenge, and we learn some skills, we develop some competencies, maybe we get some support, and then we go conquer that challenge, and then suddenly we hit with another challenge, and so this time it's a little bit bigger, or it's in a different area. And so, perseverance is all about recognizing that growth comes through challenge, and then tackling the challenge. But also sometimes that challenge has got a load of information in it, like a boatload of information in it for you. I've had many of these in my life. One that, came, there was an early one where I was challenged with my becoming a certified public accountant and working on Wall Street. And that was, in everyone else's eyes, the perfect career, right? It was just all the right buttons were being pushed, MBA, CPA, getting lots of money. And yet it was providing little inspiration, little kind of joy. The feedback loop was really all about the money and all about the status and career, aspirations or climbing that corporate ladder. And fortunately, at the time, I was involved in a martial arts program, and the martial arts instructor was also a Zen master, and so I took up the study of Zen meditation when I was 20. And this practice caused me to confront that challenge head on in a way that I wouldn't have. Right? I wouldn't have had I not taken the time to sit in silence and to investigate the nature of my mind and the stories that had led me. And so as part of that process, I kind of uncovered what my calling was, what a better story for my life was, my archetypal journey, and that was to be a warrior and a leader of warriors. And that led me to investigate different options for that, which led me to the SEAL teams. Well, as you can imagine, practically everyone thought I'd absolutely lost my mind. My family, a lot of my peers, of course, my coworkers, and rightfully so from one perspective, right? Why would you throw all that away? MBA, CPA, good career, potentially go back and lead a family business that had been around for over 100 years, to go into one of the most dangerous occupations on the planet. Naval special warfare is probably the most dangerous, right? You're working under the water, which is an absolutely unforgiving environment. And people are trying to kill you while you're doing that. So there were many opportunities where I questioned this what am I giving up, in terms of my career that I'd already invested, by this time, 2.5, 3 years into my MBA, my CPA, the family business, reputation, lost future income, and potentially loss of my life. And there were some dark night of the soul moments, Chris, where I said, I don't know if I can do this, right? I can't do this. But every time I came back to that meditation bench, which was every morning, by the way, I don't think I would have prevailed had I not had a daily practice If it was like once in a while, in the other direction would have been just too much to overcome. But because I kept coming back to the meditation bench every day and checking in with this new potential future, the more and more it just felt like an absolute necessity that I had to go down this path. There was no, like, I would be severely disadvantaged, disappointed, and if I don't go down this path, meaning I would have ended up as half the man I am or a tenth of the man I am today had I not gone on that path when I projected myself forward. So by really, creating a daily practice around checking in with what is the right thing from a spiritual or soul perspective or an inner drive perspective, and then orienting toward that every day. So I'm driving toward that in spite of maybe if I had a different job or, I was in a career that I didn't want to be in, but driving toward that new thing is what kept me on track to not quitting. Have had the idea to be a Navy SEAL and who never even made it to the starting line because of all these forces that are lining up against you when you take on a challenge that big.
No, I appreciate you touching on that, and wanted to just kind of dissect the whole meditation perspective, because I think it's something that I know a lot of people, and especially in these challenging times we're going through, have spoken about meditation and how important it is. I wanted to just get your perspective of, do you continually do that on a daily basis? And also for our listeners, for anybody that maybe hasn't thought about it and want to do it, is there a step or a recommendation that you give to people that haven't done it?
Of course. Yes, I do it daily. I consider it to be absolutely essential, as essential as eating, sleeping, and exercising. I think it's one of the most important things that we can do as human beings. And that is basically to check in and align with our deeper purpose, our deeper sense of self, our true self, capital S self, and ego, thought structures, belief systems, and identity, which is limiting. So the path of meditation is not just about reducing stress or, maybe improving sleep or those things. Those are byproducts. The main thing of meditation is to orient around, your higher sense of self, your witnessing self, your being, the part of you that is timeless and eternal. And I don't, I'm not saying that from like even a spiritual sense, but from a really practical sense, that's the experience you have. Experience of connecting to a bigger universal matrix of beingness where everybody has the sameness to them in spite of our differences and uniqueness. And so it brings great benefit in terms of your dissolving your limited ego structures and your separation from other individuals. And frankly, Chris, between you and me, this is one of the problems and why there's so much negativity and violence in our world, is because people don't take time to meditate and to check in and to expand their sense of self, to be inclusive of all others and even Mother Earth. That's the benefit. That's the outcome of a daily meditation practice. Now, it's not easy, right? I never said in that whole soliloquy that it would be easy. I just said that it would be worth it, right? Like training to be a Navy SEAL. It wasn't easy, but boy, was it worth it. So a lot of people fail because they hear about all the benefits. They may be inspired by what they just heard, but then they sit down to do it, and they're confronted with their mind, their brain, which wants to continually fall back on its training. And this training is to identify with thought and to continually elaborate thought into these big stories and dramas, and then just to things that you desire, away from things that you fear or that you don't want in your life. And so, this is how the brain works, and it's wired toward negativity. And so we have all this negative thinking, reactionary conditioning, and distractibility, because that's the way our brains are trained. And that's the way that they've been trained through centuries or millennium. And so the first order of business with a meditation practice is to begin to calm the body, mind, so that you have a fighting chance of being able to concentrate. So there's two things I just said. In my book, Unbeatable Mind, I talk about the double power punch of, I call it double and concentration, because this is how we begin a process of meditation to get into the deeper kind of spiritual or emotional benefits. First, we begin to breathe in a controlled pattern to basically calm ourselves down and to get our brain waves into a meditative state, which is like an alpha brainwave frequency state. And that brings great benefits in terms of calming your body, bleeding off stress, teaching you to turn stress into eustress instead of distress, and balancing your body-mind system so that you can sit without being so agitated, and you'll have fewer cycles of conditioned thinking because your mind is calm, right? If your mind is in a high beta or even gamma, like it's spinning and your thoughts are going to be spinning, it's hard to really relax and focus. But when your mind is in an alpha or lower frequency, then you're very calm, and it's experienced as like a calm peacefulness or an abidingness, and the number of thoughts that arise, in a river. And all of that, like I said, is still the precursor to meditation, although it's kind of sold as meditation. It's a preparatory work. And this work might take months, if not years, before you move on. But then the next step is to define or select an object of concentration, and then to develop concentration power, where you keep your mind focused, radically focused on that single object of concentration. And then to be able to witness more frequently when your mind has moved away from that object, and also lengthen the time that your mind stays on that object, and also decrease the mind that you have split attention, where part of your mind is on the object of attention and part of your mind is wandering, thinking about something else. These are all really powerful skills that we teach in our Unbeatable Mind program, because in fact, and we call it box breathing, and then we use the box breathing practice for concentration training. And then from there, I call this the whole Unbeatable Mind continuum. From there, we move into the skill of peripheral awareness or mindfulness. And then we use imagery. And when you combine these skills and use them for a directed purpose, either to define or to let go of things that are holding you back from your past, such as emotional energy or shadow work, it's extraordinarily powerful and it's transformative.
No, I appreciate you touching on that, and I think the perspective that I'm curious on is, you said you learned this when you were 20. Did you continue practicing this during your SEAL career as well as during the training?
The answer is yes. Now, I practice diligently on the bench. In Zen training, you use this little wooden bench called a Zazen bench. And we would sit for long sits every Thursday night. We would go to the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York for long 4 to 6 day sits. And then I had a practice where I sat every morning for 20 minutes. And when I got into the SEALs, as you can imagine, it was impractical for me to do that, right? And so I had to learn how to take the practice off the bench and into my everyday life. So, while I was doing a shooting evolution, I was working on my breath control and on the action instead of like my mind wandering. Now, these are things that you have to do well anyways in Navy SEAL. The training will reinforce the skills, but the fact that I came into the SEALs with an understanding of those skills and deliberately sought to improve them in the action of learning how to shoot, in the action of learning how to jump, in the action of learning how to dive and move and groove with my team, then it really, really reinforced it. And for the rest of my life, I recognized that the real benefit of meditation is accrued when it becomes a moment-to-moment off the bench or off the mat practice. And but it really, really is useful to learn the skills in that controlled, quiet, meditative environment. But you don't want to mistake that for the end result. The end result is you don't ever have to sit on the mat again or the bench. You bring the meditation with you wherever you go, there you are, and you are just practicing it. And then it becomes you. You don't have to practice anymore. It's just, you've just retrained your brain. This is why we call it Unbeatable Mind. You've retrained your brain to be constantly concentrating on what it's meant to be concentrated on, and while maintaining peripheral awareness or mindfulness of what's going on inside and around you, so that you can move closer to the opportunities and away from danger, and stay aligned with your calling, or your what the yogis would call your dharma, your svadharma, your unique reason for being on this planet. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but yeah. So I continue to practice them in the SEALs, but not in the same way, and I continue to practice it now. But I actually do a hybrid of both. I strive to have the practice be with me wherever I am, but I also enjoy heading back to the bench and just calming down, especially because I run, a couple businesses, and I've got my own podcast, and I'm running, so there's a lot of things going on. So the seated period provides a nice kind of way to reframe and to reset when I'm moving from one thing to another. And so I'll do practice in the morning. Then I have these short things I call spot drills, which I'll do during the day, which helps shift my mind back into kind of more expansive and able to see things a little bit more clearly and calm me down. And then I'm ready to blast into the next target or the next thing I'm doing.
No, I appreciate you touching on it and expanding how you did. And I think it's something that a lot of our listeners have probably thought about doing. I know a lot of us do it with different apps and things, but I think the reality is the way you described is the importance of calming yourself down and being in control. And I'm really glad you shared that. Before we jump into your book, which is fantastic, by the way, wanted to ask you a question. As we're always looking to add value to our listeners, I'm curious if you've read anything recently or you're currently reading something right now that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
Multiple things I'm reading simultaneously. So it's really kind of interesting question to ask what I'm reading right now. I have a stack of books by my nightstand. I have some audiobooks that I'm chipping through, and one of the things that I'm reading right now, which is relevant to meditation and kind of living a life that's unique, is by David Hawkins, who's the author of Power versus Force. Now, this is a sequel to Power versus Force, and it's literally just called I, just the letter I, and then the subtitle is Subjectivity and Reality. And it's a series of questions or conversations that he had that are posed to him, and then he's answering them, and about his own enlightenment experiences and spiritual development and nature of reality and the mind, and it's just really good. And David Hawkins is one of my heroes. He's just this amazing gift to the world, and he passed away in the early to mid 2000s. But the work that he's done, he was actually knighted for his work by the Queen of England in kinesiology, and being able to use that to test levels of consciousness. It's fascinating. And so that's, if anyone's thinking about a good place to start with his work is actually Power versus Force, although, because the I book is, like I said, maybe it's a little bit later on in his life, and he's actually more evolved, but it's pretty esoteric. Power versus Force has a little bit more practical application.
When was the first book written?
Probably in the, I don't know off the top of my head. Someone could fact check that for me. Probably in the 90s, I think. No. It's like, and I love reading spiritual texts and yogic texts and Buddhist, Tibetan I've just been trained so much, and starting with my Zen training through the martial arts, and I'm a lifetime martial artist. I continue to study Aikido and also Sansu Kung Fu, but also been involved in yoga for years, and I've got close to 1,000 hours of teacher training in yoga, and when you really study them, are just absolute gifts to mankind. And a lot of I've been so influenced by their training, like I said, from before the SEALs all the way through today, and the combination or confluence of those, combining those with some of the most powerful Western philosophies and technologies, such as integral theory, as well as shadow work and developmental psychology, form the basis of Unbeatable Mind. It's a completely unique program. The program that we have started with the book Unbeatable Mind. Now we have a whole coaching program. We have 300 certified coaches, and we have powerful. But I guess I'm tooting my own now. Sorry, I went to do a little sales pitch there. I apologize. That it's pretty cool though.
No, I appreciate that, and it's okay to always talk about your work. You've done some amazing stuff. So speaking of your work, your new book, Staring Down the Wolf, I wanted to kind of, maybe an interesting question, but for these challenging times, and obviously the subtitle is 7 Leadership Commitments That Forge Elite Teams, and I think we're going through a very difficult time right now, not only in our country, but throughout the world. And I think something that I've seen is the importance of leadership. So wanted to kind of maybe ask you, who should read this book, and if you had one thing to share with the listeners today about the book, what would that be?
Title is a reference to staring down the wolf of fear, right? Which is the Native American legend of that we have a wolf of courage who resides in your heart and a wolf of fear who resides in your brain. That's that negativity bias we talked about. And the wolf that you feed the most is the wolf that will dominate your personality. And so by not doing anything, you're feeding the fear wolf. And so you have to actively starve the fear by training the mind to veer away from negativity and move toward positivity, positive self-talk, internal dialogue, as well as emotional states. And and then stoke courage by learning to open up your heart and mind into your actions. And so, but it's difficult work, as I mentioned before. So meditation is part of it, but also that's just one aspect of how you do that. Meditation brings awareness to some of the negative patterns and some of the fear wolf patterns. But working with your team and using your team, or cultivating a culture, or a team environment, that team could be family or organizational team or even sports team, where everyone is committed to transparency, to humility, to integrity, to honor, to trust and respect. Well, that takes some courage. And when this happens, then all of a sudden you tend to grow really quickly through some of the limitations that have held you back as a leader. So this book is for everyone, actually it's for everyone, especially people, especially leading now through volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or VUCA, because the first person you need to lead is yourself. When you're out of control, or when you're confused or scared or uncertain, then you tend to collapse into reactionary negative thinking. That's feeding the fear wolf. And if you're doing that, you're not going to show up well for your team. You're going to dump your baggage on them. You're going to be fearful around them. The whole team will then collapse into the fear of the leader, or the combined fear of the team. And so each leader needs to start with themselves and then bring their best self to the team, but also bring the commitments, the same level of commitment into the team, so the team then holds the leader accountable and holds itself accountable. And this is the way we unlock massive potential. And the team is the next kind of leadership locus for the world, right? There's no individual who can solve the VUCA problems that we have. There's no individual president of whatever country or the world that's going to solve our problem. There's no single corporation. It's going to be teams of teams that are operating at this level, that are led by leaders of leaders who are committed to first evolving their consciousness and mastering themselves to eradicate their negativity, to be more connecting as a human being, to be more world-centric and earth-centric, and to recognize that we all need to thrive together in this interconnected web of beingness that we call humanity. So this book really is more than just a leadership book. It's a team building book, but it's a leadership book. It's a personal development book, and it's a treatise or a vision for the future on how we can solve the most intractable problems that we face as humans through teams and through what I call world-centric, integrated kind of development. The 7 commitments themselves each one of them are profound. The first one is courage, which means heart. It means connecting to heart and bringing your heart into a conversation, or your heart into your actions. And as a practice or a commitment, when you have a practice around courage, boy, does it really open things up, and it really starts the process of building an elite team that can do the things that I'm talking about. And it leads to great trust, right? Because if you courageously enter a relationship or into your team as a leader with the courage to acknowledge that you're not perfect, you don't have all the answers, and the transparency to admit when you screwed up, that's how trust is built. But when you enter a team as a leader with the old model, pretending to have all the answers, pretending to have the perfect vision as the visionary leader, or pretending to serve as a servant leader, that's how trust is bled off, because it's a facade, right? It's just a tactic. So courage leads to trust. Once courage and trust are built and built upon daily through a daily practice, then we have great respect. And respect is really the glue, the grease and the glue. Like trust is like the glue, respect is the grease of a team. Like everyone works so much better when they feel respected and they respect their teammates. This doesn't mean you have to absolutely like everything about your teammates, but you want to respect that they're telling you the truth, that they're transparent about their weaknesses, that they're not lording over you and hogging all the oxygen, taking credit for all the successes, right? And things that are common on teams that are dysfunctional or suboptimal. Once you have a commitment to these 3, courage, trust, and respect, this opens up the possibility for accelerating growth, which is the 4th commitment. And so instead of just hoping for growth or looking or enjoying it when it comes, we actually set things up in our teams so that we're driving toward growth by accepting more challenge and variety, and by seeking out mentors and coaches. And then built on top of these four comes this notion of excellence, where day by day in every way we're striving to get just a little bit better, in areas around innovation and we're curiosity, and we're willing to break things and move fast. And this idea of excellence it's not an elitist term. It just means like we are really committed to improving and moving, right? And not letting any obstacle, scare us. And then resiliency is getting smacked in the face. Like we started this conversation, a no quit attitude leads to resilience, where you expect the obstacle, you don't charge, away from it in the opposite direction, but you move toward it to investigate it, to learn how to navigate it, to overcome it, to break it down, tunnel under it, right? Whatever it is. But you use that obstacle to accelerate your growth further. And this is where the term in the SEALs, failure is not an option, that's largely misunderstood. It doesn't mean we're afraid to fail. It means that there's nothing that we look at, no obstacle that we look at as a potential fail point, because we will figure out how to find a way or make a way around or through the obstacle and to learn and grow from it. As long as we're learning and growing from the obstacles, then that's a win. It's not a fail. So that's resiliency, is the sixth commitment. And the seventh commitment is alignment, where as a team and a leader, like I said, we're a leader of leaders, and one day you might be leading, day you might be following, even if you're the appointed, selected, or role leader. You're ready to lead, ready to follow, never quit. And in order for that to happen, you got to be very aligned with the team, which means your communication strategies must be just relentlessly transparent, always sharing vision and the boundaries of what's acceptable behavior and not acceptable behavior, what's working and what's not working, what's the future look like, and where do we not want to go in terms of backwards. And this kind of communication is rare, but it's really powerful, and it's brutally honest, and it's meant to really keep everyone aligned and rowing, in the same direction with all oars in the water at the same time.
No, I appreciate you expanding on that, and I definitely would recommend that to our listeners, for them to check out your book. Interesting question. In today's day and age, I think we throw out the idea of leadership and people that are good leaders, or unfortunately, the media focuses, I feel, a lot on who people are not good leaders, whether it's in politics or on sports teams or businesses. I wanted to ask maybe if you could give an example of one or two people that you think are good leaders, and that could be professional, business, sports. I'm just curious as who you would think would be a good leader.
Well, I've had some great examples of them in my military career. One of my mentors was Admiral McCraven, who went on to lead Spec Ops and actually lead the raid that got bin Laden. He was, I profile him actually in the chapter on trust, the commitment of trust. He was an individual that wasn't afraid to really risk, and a lot of leaders are afraid to risk. And when he failed, he took 100% responsibility and admitted where he fucked up or where his role in the failure was. And you would think that would have gotten him hammered, but he was so respected for his transparency and his humility and his follow through that he was became one of the top leaders, or the top leader of all special operations forces. And so that's a rare type of leader who has that humility and transparency and the intellectual capacity to really lead at both a strategic and a tactical level. Someone like that would be a phenomenal bureaucratic leader of an organization, the size of the United States, let's just say, which is what, political leader is basically that, elected official. Like he would be a good president, for instance. Some of the best leaders I've seen are people that no one would ever know about in a million years, right? And they really are just focused deeply on serving, like a lot of the people who are on the front lines of, this COVID, the first responders and the people in the hospitals are just focused on serving and doing it selflessly and aren't asking for any glory or anything in return, and are even surprised when they're singled out for their efforts or given some sort of a plume or congratulations. It's a lot of like some of my SEAL teammates. It's like we don't need to be thanked for our service. We don't need attention. No, some people do, but I'm saying for the most part, the special ops are the quiet professionals. Even though media has really pulled a few out into the open recently. But the quiet professional is the ultimate leader. So day by day, they work to improve themselves so that they can be useful to their team. So they're not the weighted anchor dragging their team down. They want to be the motivator and the person that's able to step in when they're needed, and also is very mission focused and is doing it for the mission and not themselves, not the glory, not anything like that. Not even because they just want to go kill the enemy because they think they're bad people. It's not about that. It's about meeting the strategic goals of the country. So a lot of the best leaders I've seen are faceless and nameless to most people. In fact, the more limelight an individual has, the less likely that individual is a good leader. I'm not saying it's not impossible. There are examples. But typically speaking, there's certain qualities that attract people to fame and fortune, which are inherently the opposite of the qualities that I'm looking for in authentic leadership. Now, especially humility would be a big one.
Admiral McCraven wrote an excellent book, and I believe it was based off of a graduation speech he gave at I think Virginia,
Texas,
excuse me. And but it was I think an amazing speech because it focused on a lot of the stuff that he learned during his career in the military, and I just think it's an unbelievable book as well. You had mentioned the word accountability, and we have a clothing line, and everything is #accountability. And I just wanted to get your perspective on what accountability means to you, or how do you personally define accountability?
Well, it's very simple. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you're tasked with doing something and you don't put up objection and you accept the task, you do it. If you're responsible for a job or a team, then you do the best you can to help that team meet its mission or to help meet the objectives of the job. It doesn't mean you have to succeed in all those areas. It just means you have to do your best. So, and ask for help when you need it, right? Because nobody's perfect and nobody does things, nobody gets big things accomplished alone. So accountability is if you take it on, if you say yes, or if you don't say no, then you own it and you do it, and you do it to the best of your ability. And if you need help, you ask for help, and you don't quit until you're done. And if there's a reason that you suddenly decide, or that you're not the right person to do it, then you say it as soon as you know, and you find a way to transition it or to turn it off with everyone's agreement that is involved, all the stakeholders, so that you're not letting anyone else down. Relentless follow-through.
I love how you shared it's not about being perfect, it's about giving your best effort. And I think in today's day and age, especially with social media, people see a lot of that end result and kind of the best of kind of the Sports Center highlight. And I think the reality is that's something that's very specific that I feel in our country, it's something that needs to be focused on more is giving your best effort. It's not about perfection. It's not about being undefeated, but I feel it's always about giving your best effort. And Coach John Wooden spoke about that all the time. It's all about the effort and knowing that you gave your best effort. And if you do that, then you can put your head on the pillow and sleep well at night.
Yeah. Essentially, all you have is effort. Now, the training, consistency of training, quality of your training, and the amount of energy you put into your training and time will then determine the quality of that effort, right? Because you can have, effort for one person could be like, I'm going to walk onto the field and just get through the day. And the effort for another person is, I'm going to put in 150%. I'm going to show up early. I'm going to stay late. I'm going to take care of my teammates. I'm going to, everything I'm going to do. I'm going to study at night. I'm going to visualize. And so the outcomes or how the effort shows up in terms of results are going to be very different for those two individuals, but it's still effort.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good point too, is everybody doesn't have the same level of effort, and somebody stepping up and getting on the field versus somebody giving 100% is different because that's how people are wired differently. I'd love to change lanes here for a second, something kind of fun that we do, and we call them our hot seat questions, and the only request that we have of you is you just spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Sure. What if nothing comes to mind?
Yeah, well, then we'll just go to the next one. So if you had one last meal and you could absolutely pick anything, what would you pick?
Last meal. I would probably give it to somebody else, because if it was my last meal, then chances are it's someone else's last meal too.
Favorite sport?
I don't do well with favorites either, because it kind of suggests that there's one that's better than another for me. But I do enjoy skiing, and I consider training almost like a sport. Like my favorite thing that I do every day is my training. And I train martial arts, and I have a hybrid training system that inclusive of martial arts, functional fitness, and yoga. And to me, that's like a sport for me, because it's just an absolute blast, and I do it with a team, and but we're not trying to win anything. We're just trying to evolve and grow.
So some of these are based on favorites. So if you have them, you have them. If not, then we'll move on. Do you have a favorite movie?
Matrix.
Do you have an all-time favorite quote? I'm curious if it's military-driven or not.
No, but one of my favorites comes from the Smoke Jumpers Creed, which is, "We do today what others won't, so we can do tomorrow what others can't."
Curious to get your perspective. Do you have an all-time favorite book, or a book that just really impacted you in a positive way more than others?
Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
Favorite singer, group, or band?
U2.
I'm curious for this perspective too, is if you were stuck in a foxhole, but you could only pick one person to have your back, who would you select?
The teammate that I had trained the hardest with.
So for our listeners that want to find out more, not only about you, but also your book, and I believe you have a coaching program that you're launching soon, wanted to just ask if you wouldn't mind sharing that with our listeners.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. The book Staring Down the Wolf really is kind of the cutting edge of my thought work around this model we call Unbeatable Mind. Unbeatable Mind is an integrated developmental model for leaders and for teams. I built it out of my work with SEAL candidates, special ops candidates, out of my other company called SEALFit. The work came out of that. The SEAL candidates that I've trained have had a 90% success rate in the SEAL training pipeline, and have gone on to be phenomenal leaders, because we do this in a little bit different way. And now the SEALs are using a lot of some of the mental training techniques that we alluded to earlier. So Unbeatable Mind is really the training model that is the main model that we're offered to the public. And we have a coaching program around that, a certification program. And we just launched a new cohort. And there's information on that at our website, unbeatablemind.com. And it's a great time for people, especially if you're in between jobs or careers because of this COVID uncertainty, or you're thinking, man, I really need to learn to think a new way and learn like some of the concepts we talked about with Staring Down the Wolf. Then becoming a coach is a great way to really learn something deeply, because you have to not just learn the content, but you have to practice the content, and then you have to teach it, or convey it to others in a way that makes sense. And so in a way, you have to become embodied with it. You have to really own it at a very visceral, embodied level. This is really the essence of Unbeatable Mind. It's embodied leadership and team building. It's not just a conceptual thing. And we try to tap into whole mind. We don't try to tap, we tap whole mind, which is the body, mind, spirit, all acting in harmony and in synchronicity, so that you have the spontaneous knowingness that comes from your gut's intuition, your heart's empathy, and your brain's kind of wisdom and insight. So that's, I think, a really powerful option for people to become a coach, so that, when we think about leadership in the future, it's going to be about coaching and mentoring a team, as opposed to lording over them or being the autocratic leader, or the old industrial age top-down org chart leader. It really is more of a team of teams, which would be a term that General Stanley McChrystal uses, where you are part of multiple functional teams, even if you're the CEO. And as part of a team, you are a teammate first and a leader second. And in order to do that well, you need to be thinking more like a coach and a mentor than a old traditional leadership role top down. And so I think coaching is going to be one of the most important skills for leaders to develop, whether you want to be a coach as a coaching in terms of running a business, like an executive coaching business, or whether you're just doing it for your own development so you can be a better developer of people in your leadership roles. So that's why I think it's such a powerful program. And Our goal is to have thousands of Unbeatable Mind coaches out there so that we can meet our mission of transforming 100 million people using the Unbeatable Mind integrated vertical development method. And when I say vertical development, I mean it's meant to develop you up the stages of consciousness, so you're more aware individual, more connected, more capable. So unbeatablemindcom, the website has all the information. The book Staring Down the Wolf is found anywhere that books are sold, but we have a landing page for that, staringdownthewolf.com, that also has some free video training, which is a really kind of nice way to augment the book, because I think I've got a video on each one of the 7 commitments. It's just a few, like 6 minutes long, so it's really nice kind of synopsis of the book.
No, I appreciate that, and I think it's important how you touched on the challenging times now, where there are people that are maybe thinking of career change, and there are people that are probably dealing with career change not by choice. And I think for me and the whole mission of our business is, you only have one choice. You can, sit there and say, woe is me, or you can go ahead and take advantage of the opportunity. So I definitely would recommend our listeners checking out your book. And I have not checked out those videos, so I will do that myself. And then last question, Mark, for you, and it's a pretty simple one, but is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fear. We're recording this in early May 2020, and so people are experiencing a lot of fear and uncertainty about the future. And I would just say that lean into that. That's okay. Feel your feelings, but on the other side of fear is opportunity and courage. And so let's go forward courageously, knowing that together we're going to create a better future, and resisting, I should say, the urge to snap back into the old normal. To me, my opinion is the old normal had a lot of problems with it. Like, we were greatly over-distracted, greatly over-committed. We had really dysfunctional systems at a bureaucratic and political level. That a lot of organizations and old corporations weren't doing good. They were actually doing harm to the environment and to maybe global systems. And I think that we can together, every one of us, through our teams and our own development, we can lead the way through this to a better future, and to not rely on someone else to solve our problems anymore. We've outsourced too much of our brain and too much of our autonomy to thinking that other institutions and people are going to solve our problems, and they haven't, and they're never going to. So to take our autonomy back, and one person at a time, through the way we think and the way we connect and the way we speak and the choices we make. And I think that the world will be a very, very different place in a few years if we all can do that.
I love it, and I could not agree more. I think the word together is something that we've been using with a lot of our stuff all throughout social media during these challenging times, and I think it's the only way that we're going to get through this. And to your point, I think there is a lot of opportunity out there. It's obviously challenging. They're difficult times, but I know for a fact we will get through this. And I just wanted to thank you again for grabbing some time with us today. I truly appreciate you taking the time. I love what you're doing. I've been a follower of your work, and I hope that you and I can connect again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's been a real honor. I appreciate you having me on your show. And let me know if I can help in any other way.
Thank you for listening to episode number 266. Mark really dove deep into meditation and the impact that it's had on his life. I was very interested to find out that he was first introduced to it in his 20s, how he used it during his time as a Navy SEAL, and the fact that he still uses it every single day. Mark broke down the importance of controlling your mind as well as your breathing, and the way he explains it makes a lot of sense. In his parting words, Mark shared something that I absolutely loved. On the other side of fear is opportunity and courage. So during these challenging and difficult times, I hope that we all face our fear together and look for opportunities at the other end. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.